Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the e-commerce marketing podcast, everyone. I am your host, Arlen Robinson, and today we have a very special guest, David Morneau, who is the co-founder at inBeat Agency, a founder and CEO at Breeze.co. At his agency inBeat, David helps brands leverage thousands of collaborations with micro-influencers, as he knows that people trust user-generated content which performs better than studio quality ads. He knows he often works with the leading brands such as New Balance or Nissan to attract new audiences across North America and Europe. He's known for his unusual strategies when it comes to influencer marketing. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks for having me, Arlen. Really a pleasure to be here.
No problem. It's a pleasure talking to you. And, I was mentioning before we started recording, we're definitely hitting on a subject that I've talked about quite a bit as I've been in, of course, the affiliate space for a long time with our OSI affiliate software. We're constantly encouraging our customers to approach influencers because they're kind of like the affiliates of today. And, you're going to be talking specifically about tapping into micro-influencers and telling us who they are, what they're all about, and why they're kind of a sweet spot when it comes to influencer marketing. So, really excited to dig deep into that. But, before we do get into all that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and, how you got into what you're doing today?
Sure thing. So, past 5 years ago, right, was running an SEO agency right out of law school.
Okay.
Turned out I didn't want to be an actual lawyer. 7 years ago, actually. I always say 5, but it's been 2 years I've been saying 5. So gotcha. 7 years ago, and then started an SEO agency. We ran that for a couple of years until a client came to us and asked us really like, hey guys, I want to tap into that micro-influencer marketing thing. I've been seeing it a lot around the web, and I think it could be worthwhile exploring. So we took a look at it, realized that it looked a lot like link building in terms of processes where you just outreach, discover, and negotiate, pretty much the same kind of baseline that you'd see in link building. So we took a shot at it, and we realized, oh, this thing actually works well, and there's definitely a potential market. So fast forward to today, we're working with 25,000 plus micro-influencers. We're running an agency, a software service to help agencies find influencers, and there's no signs of stopping. So that's where we're at.
That's awesome, man. That's the great stuff. And it's interesting that, that's your kind of core area and that's what you focus on. I really like that. I've talked to a lot of agencies before in the, digital marketing space. And a lot of times, a lot of these agencies are still kind of going with the full service model, and that's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that, kind of covering the gamut when it comes to SEO, when it's coming to, pay-per-click, organic rankings, paid ads, all of that, they kind of cover all of that. But it's good to see that you guys are, focused. And again, it's kind of one of your main areas is dealing with the micro-influencer marketing, because I think, you can definitely, the way things are these days with this explosion of social media and all of these different platforms that are just, growing and growing day by day. It's really an area where, if you really focus on that with, businesses that are doing, business with you guys, you can definitely do very well. So that's good to hear. But really where I want to start off with is just really kind of, you can kind of define, everybody has heard about all these influencers and they're excited about taking advantage of the reach that they can get, but there's different levels of influencers. And so if you can break it down to us, like what's a micro influencer and, what are the different levels of influencers?
Yeah, so yeah, that's always a tough question, isn't it? Right? What is a micro-influencer? That's always where it really starts. But essentially,
Right.
we define it as 5,000 to 25,000 followers on Instagram, right? And we'll
Okay.
define it as 100,000 to 250,000 on TikTok. Having
Okay.
said that, this is not a hard line, right? For
Yeah.
specific campaigns, we'll target different follower counts. If for instance, if you're looking at this, okay, the swipe up is a must for us, then 5,000 to 10,000 doesn't make sense because you can't
Yeah.
do the Instagram swipe ups. So you're going to start at 10,000 to 25,000 in that case. And you could even expand to some point at 50,000 followers, right? That's still pretty micro. And some people even consider it 100,000 followers to be micro, but we stick really in the 5,000 to 25,000 range.
Mhm.
The reason being is that we skew heavily towards creating content at an affordable price. So that's
I
really
see.
where we get the best content for our buck, and we also get the distribution added. So it's kind of a double dip, right? Where we get
Mhm.
distribution and we get content assets that we can reuse.
Yeah, good. That's good stuff. Yeah, and it's just when we're thinking about all of these affiliates, excuse me, and these influencers, yeah, naturally when people hear that terminology, I think they're thinking of the big time people, these big celebrities, the athletes, the people that have big names in the various industries that have millions and millions of followers. But there are what people don't really understand is that when you think about influencers, really everyone in a sense is an influencer. We all have a particular following or people that are in our inner circle or in our little
I
social
agree.
networks,
Yeah.
and so I think you like people in our levels or the average everyday people would be just kind of considered kind of local influencers where we have the ability to reach people that are friends, colleagues, family members, and they'll kind of listen to what we're saying. They may take recommendations of what we recommend and that type of thing. And so it kind of goes all the way down to that very local level and then kind of up to what you're saying, to the micro influencer. And then of course it gets higher and higher, but definitely a sweet spot. And so we want to kind of go with this discussion now is really just with your business and everything that you guys have seen, why do you think focusing on micro influencers is really such a sweet spot these days rather than trying to focus on just kind of any influencer?
Yeah, so it's always a question that comes up, right? And we focus on micro influencer for a couple of reasons. First of all, we don't have to deal with agents. That makes things just a lot easier. We deal directly with the people, makes the sales cycle or negotiation cycle that much shorter. We also look at the byproduct of what we get out of micro influencers. So of course, there's the sales awareness component of it, where it's like, hey, push traffic to my website, drive sales conversions, and so forth. But again, we're looking for content as well. So we're looking for content that we can reuse in paid media for our clients. So it's a good way to power your Facebook ads to have tons of micro influencers creating content for your paid media channels. And we also look to derive some market insights from there. So what I mean by that is we ask the influencers questions about trends and product specific questions like, hey, if you were head of marketing at X company, how would you change the packaging or how would you position the product? So we look to derive market insights and drive copywriting, kind of directions from there. So that's why micro influencers allow us to scale that much easier because we can get a lot of people actually participating into that mix. And it just makes it that easier and much more cost effective on that front. When you're dealing with the agent, you lose all that. Additionally, you get all the kind of heavy cost structures that are associated with bigger influencers. So we try to stray away from that. So yeah, that's why micro influencers is where we stick.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was also reading that you worked with a brand in the past, not too long ago, called Phone Loops, and you employed some micro influencer marketing strategies for that brand and really grew them to a multi-seven-figure brand. Yeah. What specific strategies did you put in place with that company? If you could tell us a little bit about them and what you did.
So the magic behind that company is twofold. First of all, they've got an impulse buy product. So people can just instantly buy a package, $20-ish in the mail. You get tons of access. $15, I think, is probably more where it lands. And thinking in Canadian dollars, that's why. So
and I'm sorry, what is their product? What exactly do they provide?
Cell phone accessory, to prevent your cell phone from dropping. Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay. So it looks something like this here, right? Like the strap on the back of the phone. Yeah, still have one, still repping, but it's amazing anyway. Mm-hmm. So yeah, low cost of good, right? Easy to ship, easy to, extremely low cost of good and impulse buy. So with those parameters, right, we just could run a campaign where we could contact thousands and thousands upon thousands of influencers and just send them product and just get them to onboard without checking much about, like, we didn't vet all the influencers all that much, right? Because it's a numbers game at that point. Right. And then from that bunch of products that we shipped, some people just spawned as great ambassadors of the brand and were just super hyped about it, drove some sales and so forth. So what we did is, we tagged them as VVIPs, right? And from there, we just moved forward and kept doing the same cycle where take the best ones, ditch all the ones that are not performing or not even posting content for that matter, right? And just build a small army of ambassador. And then it turns out you can create content on demand. You can, you can do tons of things with that, and you can activate new product lines and so forth. So, I wouldn't say that it was the only driver behind their growth. There's a lot more to it, but it was definitely one of those catalysts that you can use to just power the entire business. It really acts as like a decentralized creative team, right? To have all that content, to run ads, to post on social media and so forth. And it just helps the growth. And it's one of those products that, when you see it, you want it. So essentially the more people have it, like going around with it, then the more sales it drives and so forth. So you can track that with, how many people are coming directly to the website or looking for our brand on Google and so forth. So that's the story.
Okay, great. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And it sounds like with a product like that, it kind of that kind of lends itself to kind of being available, like you said, to just almost, any type of influencer or micro influencer, because it's something that, anyone can use, and everyone has a cell phone these days. And so it's something that they can talk about. They can say that they use various places, and they can really push it because it's something that, like I said, everybody who doesn't have a cell phone these days. So it's something that really kind of gives it a broad appeal. Now, there are, of course, other products or other companies that may be selling something that may be a little bit more niche. And so maybe something that, not every type of micro-influencer would be able to effectively push, or would have a audience that would give it the proper distribution. What are some strategies for vetting these micro-influencers and trying to find the right one?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, look, if you're looking to sell something more, like it's always a question, like, does your product come from, like, discovery or interest, right? And then, Google captures that, like, interest part of the spectrum, where you're looking for something and you're looking on Google and you're trying, okay, well, I'm looking for a painting kit, right? So I go on Google. Having said that, though, people by the influencers that they follow are showing certain interests, right? So if you're selling a painting kit, like something more niche, right? Like we're selling painting kits, like what you're going to want to work with is not general influencers followed by anybody. You're going to want people that, even a couple thousand followers is going to cut it, where they're like doing water painting, whatever it is, whatever types of painting. And you want to work with these influencers that are extremely targeted to your product offering, and that's really how you're going to want to vet these influencers. The question you should ask yourself, just as a framework, is who is following this page, right? Who is following this page? And if the question is, well, probably my target client, then you've got a hit, and then that's the only question you should be asking yourself. And it's a good one to ask yourself, because a lot of the time, right, you're going to be like, hey, we want to promote this yoga mattress, and then we want to, and then we have this yoga girl, and, like, turns out we look at her audience, and surprise, right, there's tons of guys that are following her. So men are the biggest part of their audience. So you're not targeting your audience, even though the influencer matches your target persona. So it's really about answering that question, like, who follows this influencer. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't follow any water painting pages. I have no interest in it, but people that do will do. So
Very true. Very true. That's really the bottom line when it comes down to who's following them. And if the average person that's following them is your demographic, the type of customer you're trying to reach, then there you go. You do have a good,
you have an audience match. Exactly.
There's an audience match. And you mentioned another thing earlier as well. When you're dealing with these micro influencers, it's definitely a difference as far as the outreach that you're doing to try to connect with them. It's gonna be a little bit easier because, they're not at such a level where they're managed by, like you said, an agency. An agency is pushing these people and forming these connections where they have these gatekeepers in place. With micro-influencers, most likely they're managing all of their own contact in the relations that they build. And so it's going to be a little bit easier to get in touch with them. And so that's definitely a kind of a key thing to consider as well. Now you've worked with, of course, a lot of brands and grown them using this micro-influencer strategy. And I'm sure you've kind of seen a lot. There's been a lot of lessons learned over the years. So what are some mistakes that you think brands have made, or lessons learned that you've learned, growing different brands? And then kind of what were some kind of actionable items that you learned in results of these lessons?
Kind of the secret life of the agency, isn't it? Learning on your client's back, right? But essentially, right. we're in terms of learnings, like the biggest one is probably positioning. What I mean by that is, getting your product in the hands of influencers is one thing. Getting your positioning off is going to destroy any campaign effort, whether you execute perfectly on everything else. When I mean positioning, I mean, what are the benefits? What are the unique selling propositions? What's the deal you're offering? What is the way you're actually positioning the product in the image? What do you want the influencer to be showing when they do the post and so forth? Right? These things that are it's just like running a bad influencer collaboration is just like running a bad Facebook ad, right? If you didn't nail it, it's not going to work. So that's really the biggest thing I've noticed is if you don't get positioning right and you get lazy on that part, everything else crumbles, and it just makes for a bad campaign.
Gotcha. That makes sense. One of the, as you were talking about that, one other thing came to mind. It's kind of like a discussion that I've had with somebody else who was on the podcast. When it comes to vetting these influencers, of course, you're looking for people that have that right match. Of course, if they have your audience, then it seems like a good match. At a micro-influencer level, how important is it to find someone that, as far as when you're vetting them, to find out, what things they are and they aren't associated with? Because there could be certain things that influencer, micro-influencer is associated with that you really don't want to be a part of. Like, let's say, for instance, you within your particular company, you don't support any type of the use of cannabis, for instance, because certain subjects like that, or gambling, that type of thing. But then one of these micro-influencers, let's just say, they support that, or they're doing some type of promotion, maybe they're using cannabis, but they're also promoting your product. Should that be a concern?
I mean, depends on your brand guidelines, right? We have brands that are like, hey, we don't accept any influencers with an OnlyFans account, right? That's a big no-no for them. So, we depends on your brand guidelines, how far you want to stretch it, during the Trump era, right? We've seen a lot of, clients that are like, hey, we don't want anything like, that's like, political. So it was nothing political, either side of the spectrum, no influencers that were political, right? So you get these kind of like asks, and it really depends on where you want to take the brand, how you want to communicate as a brand, because some brands are the complete opposite, right? Like they embrace these things, right? They embrace these things and they grow on these things. And both strategies are probably viable in their own ways. It really depends. So I'd say it really depends on how you want to portray your brand. They're going to be carriers of your message, and you have to be aware of that. But, personally, I don't mind it too much. It's, or else, unless you have something like you have someone who's extremely racist or something like that in their content, and of course that doesn't make any sense. But if you're using cannabis, or you're doesn't matter to me personally. But then again, we represent the brand, so we represent the brands.
Right. Ultimately, it comes down to what the brand is open to accepting, and how far do they want to go with it. I'm just curious. It's just because we're kind of in a day and age where we're in this whole kind of cancel culture, if you will. And
exactly.
If a particular individual, somebody that's prominent in whatever industry, whatever, they say the wrong thing, they do the wrong thing, then they can get canceled, and that could be a big thing. Brands these days are quick to disassociate themselves from individuals in a heartbeat, because they know the blowback from, discussions on Twitter and what they can, get from the social media backlash it can really hurt a company. It really can. So
it's crazy. It's ridiculous, right? You look at that and you're like, oh, this is like, this calls for higher levels of brand safety for a lot of brands.
Yeah,
and
right. Very, very true. Now, David, as we get ready to wrap things up, I wanted to see if there was any examples of any other businesses that you're familiar with, that you've either worked with or just familiar with in general, that have employed a specific influencer marketing strategy, and maybe they did something unique that really caused their whole campaign to really just explode. Is there anything you can highlight or point out?
Yeah, so I got a couple brands that I just love, right? We've got Ritual, Care of. They're both in like this wellness supplement space, and they're crushing it, right? They're selling the same thing that you're used to seeing, but they're just doing it in such a good way. They've packaged brilliantly, they've positioned brilliantly, and they execute amazingly well on what you'd call ambassador/influencer marketing. It's beautiful to watch, and it's definitely we pull inspiration from companies like that, and all the time, right? That's what we follow them, and we just learn from them. So yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, actually, one last question I wanted to ask you
Sure.
that I was just thought about that really comes up a lot when you're dealing with not only, and I know in our business it's a common question as far as affiliates are concerned, and I think influencers kind of are under the same category. How does a brand determine the right incentive to pay these particular micro-influencers? Is there a particular rule of thumb that they employ, or is it something that's dictated by the micro-influencer? What do you see?
So the cooler your brand, the more goodwill you've got, the more you'll get away with, just product exchange. That's a fact.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, if your brand is cool and people are like, because this is a bilateral relationship for these micro-influencers to be associated with brands that look great and feel great is marketing for them, essentially, right? They're trying to make it to that other stage, right? So that's one of the things to take into consideration. What I'd recommend everyone doing is just like email 100 influencers, just email them and negotiate, right? It's kind of link building. How much do you pay for a link for a website that has a domain authority of 50 to 70, right? Well, how much is that worth? Well, email 100 of them and you'll find out how fast, how much it's worth, right? And that's really the game. It's it's going to change per vertical. If you're doing fintech, if you're doing financial products, it's going to change. It's going to change dramatically. And if you're trying to sell something gambling, then you're going to pay like 20 times what you're looking to.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it just really is going to vary depending on that influencer, and you of course can negotiate with them, but it's like you said, if you have a cooler brand, if you have a particular product or service that you think a lot of people want to be around and be a part of, you could maybe get away with just exchanging product with them because they want to be associated with your product, because that's going to help them get to their next level, which is the higher level of an influencer where they
and that, Arlen, is exactly the right frame of mind. Like, what's in it for them, what's in it for me, right? It's like the basic level of copywriting is like, think about what's in it for them, and then if you can build like we look at it from like a perceived value versus like monetary value kind of framework, is like, the more perceived value you can build, like you're giving to save the oceans, you're helping some minorities thrive, or whatever you're doing as a brand, all these things add up in terms of perceived value. And that allows you to build a huge chunk of goodwill that you can just leverage and create amazing relationships without having to break the bank. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, it just sounds like every type of relationship that's good that you're going to form with these micro influencers, you can really kind of structure it however you want, and it just whatever is really you feel is going to be a win-win for you and that micro influencer. You can come up with something that will meet both of your needs. So there's really, this sounds like there's really no kind of general rule of thumb saying you have to pay somebody this amount, give them this percentage of commission. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. And that's good to know. Yes. So, David, yeah, it's definitely been awesome talking to you. I've definitely learned a lot. I can talk about influencer marketing for hours and hours.
Yeah.
So it's a hot subject, and so it's a pleasure having you on. And I know I've learned a lot, and hopefully our listeners have as well. But lastly, before we do let you go, I always like to close with the kind of closing fun fact question, just so our audience get to know you a little bit better. If you don't mind sharing one
Sure.
closing fun fact about yourself that you think people will be interested to know.
God, I hate these questions, right? I mean, yeah. So I was almost a lawyer, right? And that's a
Oh.
funny. That's a fun. Like, it just
Right.
yeah. That's really one of those things in life that
Right.
God, I hated it. It was it was yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, to go
Yeah.
from law to
Yeah.
a digital marketing agency, that's definitely a switch.
Yeah, but digital
what-
marketing agency is like, that low hanging fruit when you're starting
Yeah.
out, right? Hey, let's sell websites to local businesses. And then that just
Yeah.
like unlocks, and then you don't know anything, but it's like the easy kind of way into this digital space. For us, it was at least. And
Right.
turns out, you just learn, and the learnings build on top of one another. And yeah,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
wanted
that's
out of law.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's good to know. And it's good that, you made that choice before you got too deep into it. Because I know a lot of people go down certain routes as far as their career is concerned.
Yeah.
And, they end up regretting it. And then they get in where it's like too late,
Yeah.
And, I
and
mean, you
thank
can
God,
always, it's always
yeah.
switch, but, as you get more and more responsibilities, you get a family, you get kids, you get to
Yeah.
a point where it's hard to make moves.
And it's thank God I'm in Canada for the tuition fees, because I've heard in the States, so I've heard your tuition fees for law school are pretty high. So
Oh, yeah, they are crazy. Yeah. By the way, actually, so in Canada, how is it structured for law school?
for law school, like the whole program kind of thing in Quebec, at least, is probably like, with books and everything for 3-year program, you're probably talking like 15,000 Canadians. So,
Oh, wow. Wow.
like 11,000-ish US dollars. So yeah, that's for 3 years
Wow.
of tuition. Yeah,
That's crazy. Yeah, here in the US, I mean, I think we're at some of the top law schools. I think we're talking, oof. We're looking at 60, 80, $100,000 for the whole time. Wow.
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. It's a different
Okay.
world.
Yeah,
I would have
I
probably
see.
been a lawyer, right? It's like after that, you're like, well, I'm in debt.
Gotcha. Okay, well that's good to know for anybody listening that's thinking about law school and that doesn't necessarily have the resources. Maybe consider going to Canada.
Yeah,
you never
exactly.
know. Never know. All right, great, David. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, and it was awesome talking to you. But lastly, before we do let you go, if any of our listeners want to reach out to you and connect, pick your brain, what's the best way for them to reach you?
inbeat.agency. You can book a call there. Send me an email as well, david@inbeat.agency. inbeat is INBEAT, by the way. So, or on LinkedIn, David Morneau, David MORNEAU, Morneau. So yeah, that's it. And I'm always open to geek out about this stuff. Really love it. So feel free to just book a call and we'll chat through.
All right, that sounds great. Well, I definitely encourage our listeners to reach out to you, inbeat.agency. We'll have the link in the show notes and in the transcript. And it's definitely a pleasure talking to you, David. Thank you for joining us today on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast.
Pleasure was mine. Thanks for having me, Arlen.
Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.